Occasionally from Emil Dean's riverboat, he sees this kind of bird on the shore of the Manistee. This is a ruffed grouse, king of the northern game birds. It's sort of the counterpart, the northern counterpart to our Michigan pheasant. This is a grouse in a drumming posture. They're oftentimes heard, in fact, Emil was likely to hear them in the spring when he's steelhead fishing from the riverboat. Ruffed grouse is an interesting bird. It's one that doesn't have, nowadays, any management by the DNR. These birds pretty much manage themselves, have their ups and downs, and somehow make it through the winter. That's the subject of our story right now. Michigan's native game bird is not the pheasant, nor is it the wild turkey. The truly native king of the woodlands is the ruffed grouse. It's been in our north woods since colonial times, in fact, before colonial times. And there's been very little progress in the domestic propagation of ruffed grouse. In the late 1970s and early 80s, Michigan wildlife biologists tried trapping grouse because other states wanted to introduce ruffed grouse to their woodlands. So we made a few deals where we'd trade grouse for some wild turkeys, for example. Now, how did these little birds do in other states? Well, not too well, we hear. These little birds are delicate and temperamental and won't live just any place. And they aren't easy to trap. A length of fence called a lead is stretched along the ground, and since a grouse would rather walk than fly, it would walk along the lead and hopefully end up in the trap. That seemed to be the only practical way to trap them, but how successful was grouse trapping? Not very. Our deal was to trade one grouse for 2 turkeys, for example. But the Michigan DNR fell short because grouse were so hard to obtain. Not only do grouse resist trapping, but they're extremely difficult to breed in captivity. There are only 1 or 2 Michigan breeders who have been able to successfully hatch and raise them in cages. And the price on a pair of these penned-raised grouse, we've heard, is about $1,000. So we have a bird here that we've tried to trap, tried to move, tried to propagate and domesticate, but it hasn't worked. This old DNR footage you're looking at is historical. The conclusion is that grouse and Mother Nature have kind of a thing going where they take care of themselves. Trapping and moving doesn't work because grouse like specific habitat, where you find young aspen and popple stands. In other words, where you find the food and the cover they like, you'll find ruffed grouse. Move 1/8 of a mile away where the habitat is not what they want, you won't find any grouse. When we hunted in Iron County with wildlife biologist Jim Hamill, he told us the cover, the little pieces of cover that would produce woodcock. And they did. He said, no grouse here, and there weren't. And he'd say, grouse here, but no woodcock, and he was right. A few places, he said, we'd find both. The moral of the story, find the cover, you find the grouse. Finding grouse before or after they're down can be a challenge even for a good grouse dog. Jim's pup searches high and low for this downed bird and finally comes up with it. But what about this December season in the Lower Peninsula? Does Jim Hamill think it's really worth hunting after the snow falls?
December season in Lower Michigan is a really effective time to take ruffed grouse, mostly because the birds are very concentrated in the heaviest cover that you have available. Oftentimes you don't have a lot of snow to cause the birds to be snow roosted for the entire 24-hour period. And also a big advantage of hunting the birds at that time of the year is you have some of that soft mast crop that's still up, especially gray dogwoods at that time of the year. So birds are super concentrated on whatever mast crop is still available, and they can be found on the very heaviest cover that you have, including cattails in northern region 3 and southern region 2. That's a very effective time to get very high flush rates and to be very effective on ruffed grouse. Excellent time to hunt the birds.
But a curious thing happens after the snow gets 5 or 6 inches deep. The DNR says grouse hunters stay home by the fire, and the grouse change their habits too.
Okay, if you have 8 inches of snow or so on the ground, ruffed grouse will prefer to snow roost for most of the day. And what they do is burrow into the snow, and usually enter the snow, burrow down near the ground, and then burrow off at an angle from their entry point for protection from predators. Once they are under that snow, usually it's about 20 degrees warmer there than it is right at the surface of the snow. So this is a mechanism not only to prevent them from or protect them from predation, but also to maintain their body heat. They will stay in that snow roost for almost a 24-hour period. and which coincides with sundown. Just at sundown, the birds will break from that snow roost, fly to the nearest, usually aspen tree or tree in which they're budding, and they will pick buds off those trees at a very rapid pace. In fact, for a 150-pound man to consume as much food as a ruffed grouse does in 15 minutes, he'd have to consume about 27 pounds of food. So they eat buds very rapidly during that evening period, and then just fly directly down to snow roost again for nearly 24 hours. That's a typical day cycle of a ruffed grouse during the winter period.
So they don't come out in the morning and eat then?
No, very, very seldom do they come out during the morning. It's usually a 24-hour cycle that's keyed into that snow roosting condition.
So there you go. In the snow, hunt grouse in the evenings only. That's the key. The ruffed grouse, an interesting bird, a gallant bird, one that more and more hunters are going after. They do have their ups and downs in the winter, the spring. Predation particularly is important to the ruffed grouse. Owls get after them in the woods. But the ruffed grouse is a bird that has always been in our northern forests and probably always will be an important bird to hunters in this state.